Okay, just before I start, you've got the blinds all screwed up at the back there. Like, if you could just move them, that would be a lot better. Okay, that's fantastic now. I can actually see you instead of, yeah, I can now. That's much better, yeah. Yes, okay. Yeah, well, I am all about maximising people's improvement and self-improvement, and for those people who are ambitious, helping them to get to the pinnacle of what they can be as an individual. And I apply that to everything in life, whether it's somebody's weight, whether it's to their nutrition, their fitness. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm very passionate about helping people and driving them. Sometimes it is driving them, not just encouraging. Sometimes it's driving them to be the best that they can be. And I've been extremely disappointed in the education system now for 30 years, ever since, and I'm going to pass some cynical comments here, because I think ever since the governments drove people to universities to get young kids off the dole. And I think it was a terrible, terrible mistake. Now, I can tell you why it's a terrible mistake. Whether you agree or disagree doesn't matter, but I can tell you why I believe it was a shocking mistake. If we just deal with when I was recruiting huge amounts of young people, the number one thing of all was their drive, enthusiasm and confidence. And of course not every kid's got that, so we understand that. But if they got a degree that was less than first class honours, which of course by definition 90% of kids do, that was held against them. That was a black mark that I would, not a black mark, I'm probably being too strong there, but certainly if it was a 2-2, my opening lines would be, well, why have you wasted your time at university? What have you got out of it? And they could get past that by power of persuasion and by character and telling me what they got out of university and where they came from, but it was a negative. Now, if on the other hand, these young people, instead of going to university, those that don't need to, went into an apprenticeship scheme like I did, and this is what I really want to talk about, because I think apprenticeship schemes, world-class apprenticeship schemes, are the absolute best way of developing any young person, other than those that do need to go for university for academic purposes. So, I mean, I was on telly a while back debating whether 60, 70 or 80% of kids should go to university, and I think the figure is probably nearer to 25%. And I don't say that's the right number, I just say it's probably nearer to 25%. But this is the big but, and it's a huge but. That assumes then there is a career development path that is world-class, a world-class apprenticeship scheme tied in with university-type education. In my case, it was HNC, ONC and HNC in mechanical engineering. So you've got to have that higher education coupled with an apprenticeship, but if you put the two together, it's immensely powerful. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about mine, because I joined Michelin Tyre Company in 1970. And the first thing they did was put me through 1 year apprenticeship in the training school, which was government funded. And that is the key to this as well, government funding. But it was government funded, and it was amazing, because they taught me every engineering discipline, all the machine tools, all the bench tools, welding all different types of materials, electronics, pneumatics and electrics. And by the time, after 1 year, I came out of that environment with a massive range of skills. And then I was put onto the factory in all different modules around the factory with different experiences in different disciplines, with different machinery. At the same time, they put me through, of course, I did my ONC in mechanical engineering and HNC, which was day release, so I did 12 hours at college on 1 day a week. I did a night class that was 3 hours at night, and then of course there was all the studying. So I was working probably 55, 60 hours a week, whereas compared that to a university student, what do? Well, you know, we all know some of them do next to nothing. Some of them probably work very hard, like my daughters who got first class honours in English. I know she worked tremendously hard, but You know, a lot of university kids that I speak to say, well, I didn't know what else to do, so I went to university, I thought it'd get me a better job, and it was some of the best years of my life because I did nothing but get drunk and have great fun. And I'm not labelling universities with that, so please don't think that. I'm putting different sides of the coin to that. But whereas there was no time for me to go and get drunk, although I did, of course, but, you know, I was working hard. I was working, you know, with my ONC and HNC, and I was working 30 odd hours a week with Michelin Tyre Company. They, being a world-class apprenticeship scheme, also put me through, and this is quite avant-garde, I think, and quite smart. They sent me to a mental hospital, a local mental hospital, where there were people with mental disabilities and mental health problems. So both, you know, both mental health and mental disability. And I got the opportunity, only for 3 weeks, but to see that side of life and how unfortunate people can be. And it put me really in touch with something I would have probably never ever otherwise seen or understood. And I think that was a very, very valuable part of my social development. And they put me on various social development courses, and they didn't know at this time whether I was going to become a manager or whether I'd just be a tradesman, but I was always destined for management in my mind, but they put me through management courses as well. So the overall...
Do you feel that the system is just too narrow? It's churning out too many graduates and not enough skilled, highly skilled workers?
If you were to take me as an example and compare me to the average university student at the age of 21, there is no comparison whatsoever. And I say that informally, having employed thousands of university students when they've come out. You know, it was one of our policies to bring young people, bright young people, and grow them. And when they came out of university, they weren't fit for purpose, and the universities are not fit for purpose. Now, I discount, in that comment, I discount the people who are going on to professional career paths, you know, the teachers, the lawyers, the doctors, and so on. Although you could still argue that it may not be fit for purpose for them as well. But it's a stepping stone onto that route. But certainly to get a developed young 21-year-old, there are massively better solutions, but it requires a complete rethink by the government, and it requires massive funding by the government, and then massive cooperation with the universities, because there's no reason why the universities can't still play the educational part of what I'm suggesting. I mean, in my case, it was...
What would you like to change in practice about the system? What should this rethink involve?
Well, the first thing is that as part of Caudwell pandemic recovery, I've suggested the government spend over £500 billion invested into the economy to create the future of society, to create the future of jobs. And part of that is a massive investment into apprenticeship schemes. Now, with all of that, everything I'm saying cannot be achieved at all without the government having a complete rethink and deciding to spend a fortune on apprenticeship schemes, because no employer can put the apprenticeship schemes in place that are needed to grow young people and to maximise who they are at the age of 21 without a huge sum of government money, because it's a big loss to the companies. And you've got no, you know, when you train these people like this, they're not tied into you. They can go and get a job somewhere else. You don't even know for sure that you'll need them at that time, because you don't know how the economic environment's going to be 5 years hence. So it starts with government money.
Question for you, John.
Yes.
Hi, John.
Hi.
It's very clear that you take real pride in building apprenticeships in your organisation. You can really serve young people. But nationally, we know that actually adults in the middle of their careers are more likely to be taking up the apprenticeship levy, not young people and new entrants to the labour market. And we also know that apprenticeships are not reaching those young people who are least likely to go to university, who are most disadvantaged, say those who have grown up in
Well, I think I understood the question, but the echo in your room is horrendous. So I think you need me as a consultancy to come down there, sort out your lighting and sort out your echo, and that's the sort of thing I train young people to do, to think, to think and be smart and bright. But so I'll try and answer your question, but I really didn't hear it properly. It was very echoey. Look, it starts with the brainwashing. What's happened over the last 30 years is kids have been brainwashed that if they don't go to university, they won't get a job. Then governments have changed, and rightly so in my opinion, to charging kids to go to university and leaving them with a debt. Because what on earth is the point in them going to university and spending 5 years if it really won't enable them to have a better career, a better life, earn better money, and therefore be able to put back into society the gains that they've had out of society. So I absolutely agree with that, but what I don't agree with is the brainwashing that this is the only route forward for kids to go into university, end up with a big debt and hope to get a better job. And as we all know, and I don't know what the statistics say, but the gut feel certainly, and the comments that lots of people pass is that these kids don't get a better job because there's not those jobs around. And actually, they've got no experience of life. What they've got is a geography degree or a psychological degree, or my daughter's on that course actually because she's just trained to be a psychotherapist, but they don't come out fit for purpose. So no employer is going to give them a job because they've got a geography degree or whatever the degree. They're not going to give it them. What they're going to give them a job on is based on excellence.
Yeah, hello John, it's Geoff Barton.
Hi Jeff.
My worry a little bit that this is kind of trading caricatures of what universities may or may not do and what apprenticeships may or may not do. I mean, don't we see from top performing countries that they want generalist skills, higher education, and that experience young people do get, which is easily dismissed as drinking too much. It might be that they're starting to get a sense of how you as an adult show independence. Isn't the real challenge to make sure apprenticeships, in the way that Kiran says, give you the same kind of general kind of social baggage so that you've got the confidence with all those things, the enthusiasm you say, but let's not make it a binary division that one is good and one's bad.
Well, absolutely, Jeff. No, I agree with that entirely, and I hope that with my comments you've already understood that, because for some people university is right. What I'm saying is that we've been brainwashed into university over the last 30 years, and it's wrong. It's absolutely critically wrong. What we should have been doing was investing huge amounts of money in world-class apprenticeship schemes. When I came out at 21, I was superbly confident. I'd got so many skills to sell to the world. I'd got a huge range of skills, and I'd got higher education in the form of HNC. You could take that education further because people could perhaps do 2 days of release and end up with a degree rather than an HNC. It doesn't have to be binary, you're absolutely right. But I can tell you that apprenticeship scheme gave me massively more confidence than any university course would have ever given me, because I've got skills that no university graduate is ever going to have, ever. So
Kiran's point was that the apprenticeships perhaps aren't going to being taken up by the people who need them most, that in fact perhaps the most disadvantaged children aren't getting access to the best apprenticeships.
and I would agree with that, but ask yourself the question, why? Why aren't they being taken up? If you've got a problem in business or in life, you say why. If you believe it's the right course, you say why. Now that's the problem. Now what do I do to solve it? I can tell you what the problem is. It's dead simple. There's no decent apprenticeship schemes out there. The government have withdrawn support. There is no support for apprenticeship schemes, proper support. I believe, and I don't know, but I believe the government put tens of millions into the Michelin apprenticeship scheme. And the Michelin were able to put a world-class scheme together, which I was lucky enough to be a part of. And that's what we need to do for our young people. And we need to switch the emphasis from university to apprenticeship schemes, but then we need to have proper apprenticeships, not these poor, pathetic excuses. I had a debate with the minister who's in charge of this in the government about 4 or 5 months ago, and she wanted me to help because the government were talking about putting £2,000 in per apprentice. That is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. You know, to put an apprenticeship scheme together, you probably need to put a capital sum in to motivate the company to put all the training officers in, because it's basically a school within a business. You know, you're putting proper trainers in that can train people in the right way, and that's for the first year. So in the first year, the subsidy that the companies need is huge. So
Bring Amanda Melton in here because
Hi, Amanda.
she runs a very high achieving FE college. Amanda, did you have a question for John?
Yeah, I do, and I recognise a lot of what you talk about because we deliver apprenticeships as well, and providing high quality apprenticeships as opposed to low quality apprenticeships that are designed to use levy is a very valid point. I suppose my problem is that in all work related opportunities, whether they are in university, whether they are through T-levels or apprenticeships, how do we make sure that it is not the children of the most adept parents that are getting those opportunities? Because that's what I see every day, that actually it's the son of somebody or the nephew of somebody who is getting those places at the best quality apprenticeship opportunities.
Well, you asked the question there about adept parents. I think if you say how do we make sure that the most adept children don't get the opportunity, I think that's a very good question, because I competed with, I can't remember the number now, but there was thousands of applicants for the Michelin Apprenticeship when I competed for that. I think I had about 2 weeks of interviews and tests and so on, and I was lucky enough to be one of 60 that got through. So I think the first question, I will answer the other question, but I think the first question, how do you make sure it's for more than just the most adept pupils? Well, you can only do that by having masses of apprenticeship schemes, you know, by the volume, so that instead of the Michelin only creaming out the 60 best people out of thousands, that they were actually prepared to take on a lot more. Now, in those days, there was only the National Coal Board and Michelin Tyre Company doing a really great apprenticeship scheme. So if you didn't win one of those, you were done for. And I think making the apprenticeship scheme much wider and go through everything from marketing to business through to sales and of course engineering, because engineering is the future of any country. It's vital in every aspect. Engineers, somebody said to me when I was a kid that engineers will rule the world, and they were never regarded highly enough. And I think that's probably true, but the engineers don't rule the world, unfortunately, because I think if there were more engineers bred into society would be even more advanced than it is now, and people would have amazing careers. But to your second point, how do you stop adept parents? I think your point there was it sort of jobs for the boys? Was it that sort of comment?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just disgusting and it needs to be absolutely managed. But you'll never eliminate that, will you? I mean, you'll never eliminate that, because friends produce jobs for friends. I do friends favours, you do friends favours, we all do that. But it should not be that in an apprenticeship scheme somebody's getting an apprenticeship just purely because the parents are friends with somebody. But it happens. I've just got.
Come in here.
Sorry?
In higher education access, the government has created lots of funding to try and get disadvantaged pupils into higher education. And I'm interested, what do you think, would it be a good thing if the government did invest a lot more in apprenticeships, but with that investment had quotas when it came to, for instance, young people for the first time accessing an apprenticeship, disadvantaged people from poorer backgrounds, and I think women particularly. I know you're talking about apprenticeships when I worked, about engineering, and when I worked at the Social Mobility Commission, we saw that some apprenticeships lead to great salaries and social mobility.
Yeah.
Engineering being one of them, but they're male dominated, and female dominated apprenticeships don't lead to better earnings. Those women earn less in the labour market. So I'm interested, would quotas in apprenticeships work?
Sorry, which?
Would quotas
Would quota?
in apprenticeships?
I'm not very keen on unbalancing society by having quotas. I always think the best person should win, whether they're black, white, male or female. I don't like positive discrimination personally. I understand where it comes from, and I understand there's a time and a place where that is beneficial. For instance, post-apartheid in South Africa. I'm not into positive discrimination, but I am into creating opportunities as much as possible for people. And of course, that's what we do within Caudwell Children, the charity I founded 20 years ago. We try and make certain that every disabled child, I mean, first of all, we try and do the best we can for their health, but we try and make sure that they're in a position where they can really prosper as much as humanly possible, and that their lives are as valuable to them as they can possibly be. And that's one of my central edicts. So,
You wanted to come in? Anthony, did you have a question?
John, two questions from me. This is Anthony Seldon, and thank you very much for talking to us. We really appreciate it. Question one is private schools. You went to Berry Hill, a state school obviously. Do you think that private schools are really handicapping social mobility in Britain, and what would you do about it? Question two, picking up on something you mentioned, mental health, which can significantly hold back young people, not just achieving at school, but then achieving at careers. What would you do about mental health? Two questions, John.
oh my gosh, you've given me a couple of tough ones there, haven't you? Because, you know, I started off, as you say, from Berry Hill, being against private school for my children. My wife at the time was very pro, and it was a Catholic school she wanted to send my children to. I rebelled and eventually gave in. But my argument at that time, which I think was quite flawed, is that if a child's got the ability, they don't need a private school. They fight on their own abilities, and they get the same result. And that is, of course, very, very true for the top echelon of kids. But as we know, that doesn't apply to a lot of people. So private school does then potentially give them an advantage. I mean, my kids worked probably 60 hours a week at school, because the hours were 8:30 till 5:30 and all day Saturday. So they ended up doing a lot of education. Now, clearly with public schools, state schools that are only doing perhaps 20, 25, 30 hours a week, the education cannot be anything else other than less effective. So I'm not against private schools at all, because they do a lot of good. But I think what is probably needed is, and the teachers will hate me for this, but I think they need to do longer hours. I think as children get older, they ought to do longer hours, and the teachers definitely need quality checking more, because even in the private school that my son goes to, he condemns the teachers all the time. You know, not all of them, but some of them. Some of it might just be his cantankerous nature in this, but he does condemn the teachers. And I think quality control of teachers is vital, because if we don't have a great teacher, we won't have a great result. But the other side of that is hours of work.
There is not abolishing private schools that some advocate, but levelling up state schools in terms of hours and quality of teaching.
Yes.
Let's move on to an area which is mental health, which you're very interested in, John, and you do a lot of work with your charities in. How big a problem, handicap, do you see it? And should schools be teaching children how to cope and be more resilient? What do you think?
Right, well, that's an impossible question to answer, really. And if I could answer that, Anthony, I'd be an absolute genius. But I think one of the things that is very, very central on my agenda is to teach kindness in school. Now, if we teach kindness from 4 years upwards, and we explain what kindness means, and forget feminism, forget racism, forget bigotries, forget religion, forget all of that, because if we teach kindness, all of that becomes a natural part of the child's behaviour in a kind way that is accepting and tolerant. And I think a lot of mental health does stem in children from unkindness at school, bullying. I was both the bullied and, unfortunately, as a result, fighting back, became the bullier. Now, in my case, I was lucky because I had the mental fortitude to cope with all the bullying that I received, because I had this bright red curly ginger hair and freckles all over my face.
That's a big handicap. I can see you solved your ginger problem now.
Yes, I lost all the hair. so and all the freckles joined up, so I solved both the problems. But you know, but on the serious note, I think bullying and unkindness, kids are unkind, human beings are unkind, and we need to teach them right from an early age that unkindness is a horrible thing, that kindness is the way forward, and we need to teach that. People say to me, well, that's the parents' job. And yes, of course it is, but as we all know, there's a lot of terrible parents out there, and at least if you get the school bit right, then you're teaching kindness, and if something's lacking in the home, well, at least half the equation is fulfilled, and that will definitely help with mental health.
Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, but it's really fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very, very much for making the time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Very grateful, John. John, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.